Joining us on the line is Noa Tishby. She's an Israeli-born actress, producer, writer, and activist. She's currently producing the American version of the award-winning Israeli TV show In Treatment for HBO and is author of Israel, A Simple Guide to the Most Misunderstood Country on Earth. That is certainly true. Noa, thanks so much for joining the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Ben.
So why don't we start with the very confusing election that is currently taking place in Israel. They have elections every 48 hours in Israel. That is, I believe, the legal requirement now is that every 48 hours they have to have an election. And this one looks like it's going to end in yet another election because it doesn't seem that anybody can form a coalition. There are some people abroad who think that this marks, just a sign of Israeli chaos. It seems like what they really should be taking away from this is a pretty damn democratic country if they keep having elections over and over.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This was what I've been saying for such a long time, that Israel is so democratic, it's almost ungovernable. And what actually is happening there is a manifestation of what's happening all over the world. Like there's stalemate all over the world. There's what's the parliamentary election over there is a little problematic because everybody can start a government and start a party and go get elected. But yeah, it's so democratic. Again, the single consistent democracy in the entire Middle East, and we should all celebrate that.
So let's talk about some of the myths about Israel that you talk about in your book, Israel, A Simple Guide to the Most Misunderstood Country on Earth. There's this new move on the political left in America, in Europe as well, to simply label Israel an ethno-state, to suggest that Israel's an apartheid state, a racist state. What do people not understand about Israel that they push that sort of stuff?
This was one of the main reasons I wanted to write this book, because I travel in a lot of liberal circles and I started hearing these horrific things that really stem from absolutely not understanding what Israel's about. Like Israel is a country that it evokes so many feelings and emotions and boycott movements and anger. A lot of people have an opinion about Israel, but not a lot of facts, right? And I kept getting asked, like, do you have a book that I can read? Do you have something that I can read that's easier and simple and kind of like a meta conversation and explains the whole thing? And I'm like, no, I don't. Kept looking for it. Eventually, I just said, all right, I'm just going to write it. It's really disheartening what's happening right now, because Israel is literally the only country in the region that shares the same values as America and the rest of Western civilization. And if you are a person who likes democracy, freedom of speech, human rights, LGBTQ rights, any kind of rights, and especially if you are liberal, conservatives are awesome that way, but especially if you are liberal and you don't support Israel within the context of the Middle East, you're an idiot. I'm going to help you explain why.
So let's talk about that, the apartheid charge, because that seems to be the one that's most popular these days, particularly on college campuses, is that Israel's an apartheid state that treats the Palestinians as second-class citizens. This seems to completely ignore the fact that the Palestinians are largely self-ruled and that Arabs inside Israel have the same rights as Israeli citizens because they are Israeli citizens. But where is this coming from, and why are people getting it wrong?
Well, to say that Israel is an apartheid state is borderline slander, right? The Arab Israelis within Israel have the exact same rights. An Arab judge was the one who sentenced a former president to jail. He is now a Supreme Court judge. I really don't understand how that is apartheid. That's really annoying to even hear, right? But so are we going to touch BDS now?
We certainly can.
Yes, we can. I mean, I'm encouraging people to actually read this. There's a whole chapter there. I'm ripping them a new, you know what. So there's in recent 10, 15 years, there's been a movement called BDS, which is Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions, which is a movement, an organization that's trying to label Israel an apartheid state, which again, when you look at the facts and not feelings, it's mental gymnastics, right? This movement, this organization has put a lot of effort into college campuses, trying to affect hearts and minds of young Americans, young Europeans, future voters, future elected officials. And they basically started using this woke lingo of justice and peace and love and all of that, where actually they are a movement about making Israel not exist. So it's a movement, and the founder of the movement actually says that flat out, like, yes, we definitely don't want a Jewish state in any parts of the land, which is okay. If you have that kind of an opinion, that's fine. Just say it out loud. The problem with BDS is that they literally cloak their dagger, and by using this woke terminology are able to attract to them a lot of young liberals that don't know what it is they're supporting, don't know who it is that they're supporting, including some elected officials. And it's like, so you're obsessing over one country in the world, and you want that particular country to not exist. Okay, just look into your own personal biases and let me know how that makes sense.
And Noah, you mentioned earlier that you walk in a lot of liberal circles and you talk with a lot of people who are on the left side of the aisle. And it has been astonishing to watch as Israel, which used to have a pretty high level of bipartisan support, has become such a partisan issue. If you go back to the 1990s and you looked at the poll statistics, it was true that conservatives were more supportive of Israel than people who were liberal, but it wasn't as though liberals were unsupportive of Israel. It was still by a wide margin that liberals were very supportive of Israel. Now, if you ask a simple binary question like, who do you support, the Israelis or the Palestinians, it's almost a 50-50 shot in the liberal community. Why do you think that has happened in the last few years?
The good news is that let's say the people who are in the know, they don't really. They understand that the United States should stand firm with Israel and Western civilization should stand firm with Israel, which doesn't mean that you're not pro-Palestinian as well. Like, being a Zionist was taken out of context in recent years and is used as a slur. Where being a Zionist literally means Zionism is a movement for Jewish liberation and self-determination in a Jewish yet not exclusively Jewish state. And I don't understand how that's a controversial statement whatsoever. Now, in terms of, again, the reappropriation of like BDS movement's reappropriation of like the Palestinian cause and its usage of intersectionality to infiltrate social justice causes is what actually affected a lot of my liberal friends. It was heartbreaking. I would find myself in like living rooms having conversations with friends, and they were like, "No, Israel's an apartheid state." I'm like, "How is it an apartheid state when the third largest party in the country is an Arab party? How is it an apartheid state with 20.8% of nurses and doctors in Israeli hospitals are Arabs? How is it an apartheid state when 86% of Arab Israelis say that they don't wish to move to a Palestinian state should one get created?" Which is amazing. Israel's a multicultural, multinational, with the only country in the region where you can practice any religion freely. Amazing. Why are we getting crap from like the left in America right now? What happened? Truth is, politics happened. So I'm here to help people understand what's fact and what's fiction.
What do you think is the future here in terms of Israel's relations with the West? Because it does seem like things have been moving in the wrong direction. The Trump administration, of course, is very friendly to Israel. The Biden administration is staffed with a lot of people who are a lot less friendly to Israel. They've made overtures toward Iran in a way that obviously the Trump administration did not. But at the same time, you've seen that Israel has forged relationships across the Middle East with Arab countries in a way that is unique in world history, frankly. And it seems like a lot of the map is shifting pretty radically. What do you think is the future here?
This is the future. Listen, the Abraham Accord and the breakage of basically the Arab League with these agreements is just nothing short of extraordinary, right? And a lot of people who have various opinions about the Trump administration, you look at that and you go, wow, that is incredible. Because here's what happened with the Abraham Accord basically right now. What has been going on in the region, and we know this, and everybody and all our neighbors, everybody know this, right? That Israel is not the biggest problem in the Middle East. Iran is. Okay. And this is the first time that all the Arab nations, the moderate Arab nations, or that want to be more moderate or want to kind of like have a relationship with the West and want to get advancement in technology and in agriculture and in human rights, are kind of coming to Israel really kind of quietly and being like, okay, let's just part, let's just kind of sign deals, which is unfortunate that the region is transforming, yet the liberals here aren't. Like, if you go on college campuses, it's still the big bad wolf, where it's like, really? But like moderate Arab nations in the region are actually acknowledging this publicly for the first time. So this agreement and these agreements and the conversations that are being had right now with other Arab nations are nothing short of extraordinary. I think the intention for everybody in the region is to, come together and collaborate on everything that Israel can contribute.
Well, the book is, once again, Israel, A Simple Guide to the Most Misunderstood Country on Earth. It is a must-read. Noa Tishby, really appreciate your time and the work that you're doing on behalf of Israel.
Hang on, can you just say that again? Because I really enjoyed hearing it.
The book is a must-read. Go check it out. Israel, A Simple Guide to the Most Misunderstood Country on Earth. Really appreciate your time.
Great to meet you.